Poor single dad shelters stranded millionaire. Next week 80 luxury cars surround his tiny home. The road was empty, the engine was dead, and the sun was already sinking behind the Tennessee hills. But no one imagined what would come next. If you enjoy stories that remind you what truly matters in life, drop a like and leave a comment below. Your support means the world and helps us keep sharing stories like this one. The summer of 2019 was the hottest in Clover Ridge, Tennessee, in over 30 years. Old folks on Main Street said the heat came down like a punishment that year. Slow, heavy, unforgiving. The creek behind the elementary school had dried up by June, and the wildflowers along Route 9 had turned brown before July even started. But none of that bothered Joseph Calloway much. He had always been a man who made peace with things he couldn't change. At 38, Joseph had the kind of face that told a story without saying a word. Deep-set brown eyes that stayed calm even when everything around him wasn't. Hands roughened by years of soil and sun. Hands that had planted rose gardens for wealthy families in Nashville on weekdays and fixed the leaking roof of his own small house on weekends. He was not a man of many possessions. His truck was a 2004 Ford F-150 with a crack in the windshield he kept meaning to fix. His house had 3 rooms, a porch with 2 rocking chairs, and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee, and something warm on the stove. But the most important thing in Joseph's life sat at the kitchen table every morning in mismatched pajamas, kicking her feet under the chair and asking questions that had no easy answers. Lily was 6 years old that summer, 6 years old and already, somehow, the most serious person in the house. She had her mother's dark curls and Joseph's quiet eyes, and she carried herself with a dignity that made grown adults pause when she looked at them. She had been raised in that small house, mostly by a rotating cast of babysitters while Joseph worked long hours across Nashville and the surrounding counties. He tried, Lord knows he tried, but being a single father with rent to pay and a small landscaping business to keep alive meant that Lily spent many afternoons with Miss Clara from down the road, or with old Mr. Prentice who let her watch game shows and gave her too many oatmeal cookies. Joseph felt the guilt of that every single day. It was the quiet weight he carried from sunrise to sunset, heavier than any load of mulch or sod he ever hauled. That Thursday morning in July, he left before 6, kissed Lily on the forehead while she slept with one arm curled around her stuffed rabbit, and drove 45 minutes to an estate in Franklin, where he had a full day of landscaping ahead. Miss Clara would be there when Lily woke up. Everything was arranged. Everything was routine. He had no idea that by the time he drove home that evening, nothing would ever be routine again. Route 9 changed everything. Joseph was on his way back, windows down, radio low, the smell of cut grass still on his shirt, when he saw it, a car on the shoulder. Not just any car, a silver Porsche Taycan, easily worth more than Joseph's house, sitting dead on the gravel with its hazard lights blinking weakly in the fading evening light. He slowed. He almost kept going. It was 7:40 in the evening and he was tired in his bones and Lily would be waiting. But some stubborn instinct his mother had planted in him as a boy in this very county, made him pull over. The woman standing beside the car was not what he expected. She was young. Late 20s maybe. Tall, with the posture of someone who had learned early that the world responds to how you hold yourself. She wore a silk blouse the color of cream, tailored linen trousers, and heels that had absolutely no business being on a Tennessee back road. Her dark hair was pulled back precisely, not a strand out of place, and her face, and even tight with frustration, was the kind of face that made you forget for just a moment what you had been about to say. She was on her phone, or trying to be. She lowered it as Joseph stepped out of the truck. "No signal?" he said. "Not for the last 40 minutes," she answered. Her voice was controlled. Not warm, but not rude. The practiced voice of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations without showing strain. What happened to the car? It just stopped. It was making a sound and then... She cut herself off as if she had already said more than she intended to a complete stranger. "I'll figure it out." Joseph looked at the Porsche, then at the empty road stretching in both directions, then at the sky, which was doing what Tennessee summer skies do at that hour, burning copper and darkening fast at the edges. "There's no tow service out here until morning," he said. "Ray's garage closes at 6. She stared at him for a long moment. "My name is Joseph Calloway. I live about 4 miles back. You're welcome to come in, use the landline, get something to eat. Ray can come first thing tomorrow and sort the car." There was a pause that stretched longer than it should have. She looked at the road. She looked at him. She looked at the dead silver car behind her, and at the darkening sky above the hills, and at the absolute emptiness in both directions. "I don't know you," she said finally. It wasn't an accusation. It was almost a question. "No," he said. "You don't." He didn't argue. He didn't list reasons she should trust him. He just stood there with his calloused hands and his cracked windshield truck, and the kind of face that doesn't know how to be anything other than what it is. And he waited. "Natalie," she said at last. "Natalie Hargrove." He nodded once. "You hungry, Miss Hargrove? Because I've got a pot of chicken soup that's been on slow cook all day, and it would be a shame to eat it alone." Something moved across her face, fast, unguarded, immediately controlled, like a window blown open by the wind and pulled shut before anyone could see inside. "Fine," she said quietly. "One night." She had no idea it would be 7. The house surprised her. She didn't say so, but Joseph saw it in the way she paused at the porch steps and took everything in before setting foot on them. The hanging baskets of deep pink begonias, the wind chimes made from old copper pipes. The welcome mat Lily had painted in kindergarten with small handprints in 5 colors, and the endearingly misspelled word home in red. He had mentioned Lily in the truck. "My daughter," he'd said simply. "She's 6. She can be quiet at first, but once she gets comfortable, she asks a lot of questions. Just so you know." Lily was not asleep. She was sitting on the couch in her yellow pajamas with her feet on the cushion, and her arms folded across her chest, and her dark, serious eyes fixed on the front door the moment it opened. The television was off. The room was very still. Natalie stepped inside and the light caught her face, and Lily looked at her the way a person looks at something they have already decided they are not sure about. "Who is she?" Lily asked her father. Not unkindly, but with a directness that left no room for softening. "This is Ms. Hargrove, sweetheart. Her car broke down out on Route 9. She's going to stay tonight while we get it sorted." Lily's gaze moved back to Natalie. It moved slowly and deliberately over the silk blouse, the carefully arranged hair, the completely impractical shoes. Something in the small girl's face settled into an expression that was difficult to read. Not quite suspicion, not quite something else. Just a deep, watchful stillness. "She can have the guest blanket," Lily told her father. Then she unfolded herself from the couch, walked down the short hallway with measured steps, and pulled her bedroom door shut behind her with a quiet, deliberate click. Natalie stood in the small living room and looked at the closed door for a moment. "She's direct," Natalie said. "She is," Joseph agreed without apology. "Come on, let me get you that soup." He heated the slow cooker and ladled 2 bowls and set them on the table with spoons and a sleeve of crackers and 2 glasses of cold water from the tap. They sat across from each other in the narrow kitchen under the warm yellow overhead light, with the sound of crickets drifting through the window screen and moths tapping softly at the glass. And for a moment it was one of the most profoundly ordinary scenes imaginable. Natalie Hargrove, who had eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris and Tokyo and New York, picked up that simple spoon and ate that simple chicken soup, and something in her face very quietly let go. Not because she was starving. She had eaten a granola bar in the car 3 hours ago, but because something in that kitchen, something in the unhurried quiet, the soft light, the complete absence of anything to perform or manage or control, had reached her in a place she had stopped expecting to be reached. The warmth of the bowl in her hands, the smell of thyme and bay leaf, the sound of nothing urgent happening anywhere. She kept her expression composed. She made appropriate conversation about the drive from Nashville and the heat and the state of rural roads. She was very good at composed, but Joseph noticed. He noticed the way her shoulders dropped by just half an inch somewhere in the middle of the first bowl. He noticed the way she stopped looking at the door and started just sitting there. He didn't remark on any of it. He was not a man who remarked on things before their time. He simply refilled her bowl without asking. And down the hall, behind a door painted with stick-figure horses and one lopsided rainbow, a 6-year-old girl lay on her back in the dark with her stuffed rabbit on her chest, staring at the ceiling, listening to the low sound of her father's voice talking calmly to someone she had already decided she did not like, and feeling something unfamiliar and unwelcome pressing quietly against the inside of her ribs. Natalie Hargrove had not slept in a house like that in a very long time, possibly ever. The guest room, which was technically a reading nook that Joseph had quietly converted sometime in the night, using the pull-out cushion from the couch and a folded quilt that smelled of cedar, had one small window that looked out onto the backyard garden. She lay on her back in the dark and listened to things she did not hear in Nashville. Frogs, a distant train, the particular silence of a house where people sleep without anxiety. She kept telling herself she would look at her phone, check her emails, draft a message to her assistant. She had 12 missed calls and 37 unread messages. She knew because she had looked at them in the bathroom before bed, standing in a narrow bathroom with a bar of Irish Spring soap and a child's plastic cup shaped like a frog on the edge of the sink. She had not replied to a single one. She told herself it was because the signal was still poor, but she had 2 bars by then, which was enough. The truth was something she wasn't examining yet. She was asleep by 9:30, which had not happened since she was a teenager. Morning in that house arrived without ceremony. There was no alarm. There was the sound of small feet on a wooden floor and then the smell of coffee and then, through the thin wall, a child's voice saying, "Daddy, is she still here?" And a man's low voice answering, "Yes, sweetheart. Ray can't come until after lunch." And then a pause. And then, "Why does she have to eat breakfast with us?" Natalie lay still and heard all of it. She waited until she heard the skillet before she got up. The kitchen was bright with morning light. Joseph was at the stove making eggs. Lily was at the table in a different pair of pajamas, orange this time with small white stars, eating a piece of toast and reading a picture book with the focused solemnity of someone reviewing important documents. She did not look up when Natalie came in. "Morning," Joseph said. "Coffee's ready. Mugs are on the second shelf." Natalie found the mugs. She poured her own coffee. She sat at the table across from Lily, who continued reading without acknowledgement. For a full minute there was only the sound of the skillet and the birds outside and the turning of a page. Then, without lifting her eyes from the book, Lily said, "My dad makes the best eggs." It was not an invitation. It was a declaration of territory. "I believe it," Natalie said carefully. Lily turned a page. "He uses butter, not oil. Oil is wrong for eggs." Another pause. "My grandmother told him that. She sounds like a smart woman." Lily looked up for the first time. Her dark eyes were assessing and completely unimpressed. She was. She died when I was 4. She looked back at her book. "I still remember her, though. I remember her hands." Joseph set a plate of eggs in front of each of them and sat down and poured his own coffee, and the 3 of them ate together in the small, bright kitchen. And Natalie could not have explained to anyone why that meal felt like something significant. It was eggs and toast and grocery store orange juice. It was completely ordinary. And yet, she had grown up in a 12-room house in Brentwood, with a chef and a housekeeper and parents who ate in the dining room when they ate together at all. She had lived alone in a penthouse in downtown Nashville for the past 4 years. She ate at her desk most mornings. This was different in a way that her vocabulary, which was extensive, did not quite cover. After breakfast, Ray from the garage called. The Porsche needed a part that had to come from Memphis. 2 days, minimum, possibly 3. Natalie stood on the porch with her phone pressed to her ear and stared at the garden. Rows of tomatoes and sunflowers and something she didn't recognize climbing a wire trellis, and felt the first real flutter of something close to panic. 2 days, 3 days, 3. Here. She had the Meridian Group Board presentation on Monday. She had a call with the Singapore office Sunday morning. She had 17 things that required her specific attention, and 0 of them could be managed from a 3-room house in Clover Ridge, Tennessee. She turned to go back inside to explain this to Joseph, to ask if there was somewhere nearby she could rent a car, to begin the process of extracting herself from this situation that she had wandered into. Lily was standing in the doorway. She wasn't blocking it exactly. She was just standing there in her star pajamas with her picture book under her arm and her arms folded, watching Natalie the way small animals watch things they haven't decided about yet. "Is your car really broken?" Lily asked. "Yes." "For how long?" A few days, it seems. Lily considered this with great seriousness. Her expression did not change. My dad fixes things, she said finally. He fixed the refrigerator and the porch rail and the Henderson's fence after the storm. A pause. He probably can't fix a Porsche, though. Probably not, Natalie agreed. Lily nodded once as if this confirmed something she had suspected. Then she turned and walked back inside without another word, leaving Natalie standing on the porch alone with the garden and the morning and the sudden, strange awareness that she had just been evaluated by a 6-year-old and had not quite passed. She called her assistant instead of calling for a rental car. She didn't examine that decision either. By afternoon, Natalie had set up a makeshift workspace at the kitchen table with her laptop and her phone and a legal pad. And Joseph had gone to a job in the next county, and Miss Clara had not come because Lily had informed her father at breakfast that she did not need Miss Clara, and she was 6 years old and perfectly capable. Joseph had looked at his daughter for a long moment, and then looked at Natalie, and something passed between the two adults that was not quite an arrangement, but functioned as one. So it was Natalie and Lily in the house for the afternoon. Natalie at the table with her work, Lily on the couch with her books. The two of them in two separate orbits, not speaking, occupying the same small space with a carefulness that was almost formal. Natalie was on a call with her CFO at 2 o'clock when she heard it, a small, sharp sound from the living room. She looked up. Lily was on the floor beside the couch. She had climbed up to reach something on the high shelf, a ceramic horse, white with brown spots, and had slipped getting down and knocked the figurine. It had not broken, but it lay on the floor and Lily was on her knees beside it with both hands around it, and her face was doing something complicated. Natalie said quietly into the phone, "I'll call you back in 5, and ended the call. She went to the doorway. "Are you okay?" Lily was looking at the horse. "It's my mom's," she said. Her voice was perfectly even. "Dad keeps it up there so I don't accidentally break it." A long pause. "But you wanted to hold it," Natalie said. Lily didn't answer. She very carefully picked up the figurine and held it in both hands and looked at it. Then she stood up and stretched to put it back on the shelf, arms fully extended, on her toes, and couldn't quite reach. She was an inch too short. She stood there at full stretch for a moment. Arms up, the horse in her hands. Natalie walked over. She took the figurine gently from Lily's hands and placed it back on the shelf in the exact spot the dust ring indicated. Then she stepped back. Lily lowered her arms. She looked at the shelf. She did not say thank you, but something in her face had shifted. Just slightly, a fraction of a degree, like the first movement of something that had been very still. She went back to the couch and opened her book. Natalie went back to the table and opened her laptop. Neither of them said anything about it. But when Joseph came home at 6 and dinner was on the table, Natalie had found a box of pasta and a jar of marinara, and had done what she could. Lily looked at her father and said, very quietly, "She put Mama's horse back for me." Joseph looked at Natalie. Natalie was looking at her plate. The three of them ate dinner together, and outside the window the fireflies had started in the garden, and for a moment, nobody needed to say anything at all. By the third day, Natalie had stopped pretending she was about to leave. She told herself it was practical. The Porsche was still waiting on a part from Memphis. She had rescheduled the Monday board presentation to Wednesday. Her assistant Marcus had handled the Singapore call without her, competently, as he always did, which was something she chose not to think about too hard. She had her laptop and a workable signal, and the kitchen table was, if she was being objective, a quieter and more focused workspace than her glass-walled office in downtown Nashville, where something was always happening and someone always needed something from her. Practical, temporary, perfectly logical. She was also, for the first time in years, sleeping through the night. She did not include that in her internal justification. Joseph left early each morning, before 6 on Friday, before 5:30 on Saturday, because he had a large residential job in Brentwood that week and the heat meant earlier starts. He left coffee in the pot and something on the counter, a banana, a note about where the bread was, once a small paper bag from the bakery in town with 2 blueberry muffins and a sticky note that said, "Clara's day off. Lily likes the one with more sugar on top." Then the sound of the truck and the crunch of gravel in the house was quiet. and Natalie was alone with Lily again. The girl had not softened. That would be too strong a word. But the rigid formality of the first day had shifted into something else. A watchfulness that was less hostile and more complicated. Lily watched Natalie the way someone watches a weather system that hasn't made up its mind yet. With attention, with a slight readiness to take cover. Saturday morning, Lily came to the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, purple this time with small yellow moons, and found Natalie at the table with her coffee and her laptop, and stood there a moment before saying, "Do you know how to braid?" Natalie looked up. "Hair? Yes. Miss Clara braids my hair on Saturdays, but she's not coming." A pause. Natalie closed her laptop halfway. "Do you want me to try?" Lily considered this for longer than was comfortable. Then she went and got her brush and a bag of hair ties from the bathroom and came back and stood in front of the kitchen chair, with her back to Natalie, and waited. She did not say please. She did not say thank you when Natalie started. She sat very still with her hands in her lap and stared straight ahead at the wall, while Natalie carefully separated the dark curls and began working them into a French braid. "Tighter," Lily said. "Yes, ma'am," Natalie said. A pause. "Miss Clara says ma'am is for old ladies." "Miss Clara is right, I'll keep it in mind." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're doing it wrong." "Show me." Lily reached back and guided Natalie's hands to the correct positioning with a matter-of-fact authority that was so precisely like something a grown woman would do that Natalie had to press her lips together to keep from smiling. "Like that," Lily said. "Like that," Natalie agreed, and continued. The braid took 12 minutes. When it was done, Lily went to the bathroom mirror and examined it for a long time from several angles. Then she came back to the kitchen and sat at the table across from Natalie and opened her book. "It's okay," she said. Natalie picked up her coffee. "High praise." Lily did not respond to that, but she stayed at the kitchen table instead of going to the couch, which was new. She read her book, and Natalie worked on her spreadsheets, and the two of them sat together at the table in the morning light without needing to fill the silence. And something about that felt different from the silence of the first day. Less like a wall and more like a room they were both in, with the door open. That afternoon, Joseph came home early. A pipe had broken at the Brentwood property, and the job had been called for the day. He came in through the back door smelling of soil and sweat, and stopped in the kitchen doorway. Natalie and Lily were at the table. Lily had abandoned her book and was watching with maximum seriousness as Natalie walked her through something on the laptop screen. Natalie had pulled up a simplified satellite map of the solar system. She'd found it after Lily had asked, completely without preamble, whether the sun was bigger than all the other stars or just the ones near it. "That's Jupiter," Natalie was saying. "It's so large that all the other planets in our solar system could fit inside it." Lily stared at the screen. "All of them?" "All of them. At the same time. That doesn't seem right." "I know. But it is." Lily leaned closer to the screen, squinting as if the scrutiny would reveal some error. "Even Earth?" "Even Earth. Earth would look like this next to Jupiter." Natalie pulled up the comparison image, a small pale marble beside an enormous banded sphere. Lily went completely still. Then she put her finger on the screen on the small pale marble and pressed it gently, like she was making sure it was still there. Joseph watched all of this from the doorway for a long moment before either of them noticed him. When Lily finally looked up and saw her father, something quick and complicated moved across her face. Love and guilt and something that looked almost like being caught at something. She sat back from the laptop. "Daddy, did you know Earth would fit inside Jupiter like 100 times?" "About 1,300 times, actually," Natalie said. Lily turned back to her. "You didn't say 1,300. I was rounding down. That's the wrong direction to round." Joseph came in and set down his bag and poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, looking at the two of them at the table. His daughter with her Saturday braid and her finger on the screen solemnity, and this woman, this unexpected woman with her silk blouse and her complicated eyes, who was patiently explaining the scale of the solar system to a 6-year-old at 4 in the afternoon, as if there were nothing in the world she would rather be doing. "You're good with her," he said quietly when Lily had gone outside to look at the sky. Natalie looked at the door. She's good, she said. She doesn't let you get away with anything. No, he agreed. She never has. There was a pause. Outside, through the window, they could see Lily in the backyard garden, standing very still in the evening light with her head tipped back, looking up at the sky with an expression that was private and enormous. Looking for Jupiter, maybe. Or Earth. Or the small true size of things. Her mother? Natalie asked carefully. Gone before Lily turned 2, Joseph said. He said it simply. Without armor. Car accident, she never really knew her. I'm sorry. She keeps the horse on the shelf. He looked at his coffee. Says she can still feel her when she holds it. I don't argue with that. Natalie was quiet for a moment. Then, she told me you fix things. Joseph looked up. She said you fix the refrigerator. The porch rail, the neighbor's fence. She said you probably couldn't fix my car, though. Something moved in his face. Deep and warm, like light through good wood. She's right about that. She usually seems to be, Natalie said. They stood in the kitchen in the fading afternoon with the window open and Lily outside in the garden, counting stars that hadn't appeared yet. And neither of them said anything for a while. But the silence had changed again, shifted into something neither of them had a ready name for, something that had not been there 3 days ago when a silver car died on Route 9 and a woman in impractical shoes decided to trust a stranger with calloused hands. Something was beginning. Neither of them had admitted it yet. But Lily, standing in the garden with her head tipped back, had already felt it. And whatever she felt about it, she had not yet decided. She was 6 years old, and she had learned early that the things that mattered most were the things you watched very carefully before you let yourself want them. She looked up at the darkening sky and hugged herself slightly around the middle. Above the garden, the first star appeared. Then another. Then one more, very bright, a little to the left of where she'd been looking. She stared at it for a long time. Inside the kitchen, her father laughed, low and real, at something the woman had said. Lily had not heard him laugh like that in a long time. She wasn't sure what to do with that. So she did what she always did with things she wasn't sure about yet. She filed it away. She watched the stars, and she waited. The 4th day was a Sunday, and it rained. Not the violent summer storms that sometimes rolled through Clover Ridge with enough force to take shingles off roofs and send creek water over the road. This was something gentler, a long, slow, gray rain that came before dawn and stayed all morning, tapping at the windows with a patience that matched the house itself. Joseph had no jobs on Sunday. That was the one day he had always kept clear, not out of any particular religious conviction, but because Lily needed at least one day where her father was simply present. Not driving somewhere, not arriving home tired and late and smelling of other people's gardens. Just there, sitting on the porch, reading to her after lunch, teaching her the names of things in the yard that most people passed without noticing. Natalie came out of the guest room at 7 to find the house already alive in its quiet way. Coffee made. Joseph at the kitchen table with a crossword and a pen. Lily on the floor of the living room with an enormous jigsaw puzzle spread across a flattened cardboard box. A puzzle of the night sky. All deep blues and scattered white stars, 500 pieces. She was working on it with complete absorption, turning pieces in her hands and examining their edges before placing them with a certainty that suggested she had a system. "Morning," Joseph said. "Morning," Natalie said. She poured her coffee and stood at the window and looked at the rain moving through the garden in soft curtains. She had 4 missed calls from her mother. Her mother, who called perhaps 6 times a year and always with a specific purpose. She had not called back. She had not examined why. She had a message from the chairman of the Meridian Group asking if she was well. She had a message from her attorney about the Hargrove Estate Trust documents that needed her signature. She had a calendar full of the week ahead, solid with meetings and calls and decisions that only she could make. She looked at the rain. She sat down at the table across from Joseph and picked up a section of the crossword he had set aside. "May I?" He slid a pen toward her without looking up. They worked in separate sections of the puzzle. The word puzzle at the table, the picture puzzle on the floor, and the rain kept on. And the house smelled of coffee and the particular warm damp smell of a rainy morning with the windows cracked just enough for air. After a while, Lily said from the floor, 11 across is wrong. Joseph looked up. How do you know? You can't even see it from there. You've been stuck on it for 20 minutes. You always tap the pen when you're stuck. It was quiet and then it started tapping again, which means you wrote something and then got stuck again. Joseph looked at Natalie. She does this, he said. What's the clue? Natalie asked Lily. How should I know? I'm doing my own puzzle. But she turned around on the floor and looked at the crossword from where she sat. Read it out loud. What silence can be? Joseph read. 7 letters. Starts with G. Lily turned back to her puzzle. She picked up a piece, examined it, put it down. Golden, she said. Joseph looked at the boxes. He counted. He wrote it in. He looked at Natalie. Golden silence, Natalie said softly. There's a whole concept, Lily said from the floor, still not turning around. Miss Watkins told us. Sometimes not talking is the best thing you can say. That's what golden silence means. A pause. I think most grown-ups don't know that. Joseph met Natalie's eyes across the table, and for just a moment something passed between them that was not serious at all. A shared, helpless recognition of the precise and 6-year-old correctness of that observation. And Natalie's face did something it had not done once, since she arrived on Route 9 in her impractical shoes and her controlled expression. She smiled. Not a polite, managed smile. A real one. Quick and unguarded and warm. The kind that reaches the eyes before the brain approves it. Joseph looked at it for just a second longer than he should have. Then he looked back at his crossword. The rain continued. By afternoon, the puzzle on the floor was half assembled, and Lily had moved to the couch with a book, and Natalie had taken a call in the guest room that lasted 45 minutes, and came back to the kitchen looking like someone who had just been reminded of a life that existed elsewhere. Joseph was making sandwiches. He handed her one without asking what she wanted on it. Turkey and sharp cheddar and a thin spread of mustard and a pickle on the side. She looked at the plate. How did you know? You put mustard on the crackers last night, and you ate around the sweet pickles. She looked at him for a moment. You pay attention. Hazard of the profession, he said. You can't put the right thing in the ground if you haven't looked at the soil first. She stood at the counter and ate the sandwich and looked out at the rain, and after a while she said, My father built the company I run. He died 3 years ago and left it to me because there was no one else and because he believed I could hold it. And I have. I have held it. I hold it every single day. Joseph said nothing. He leaned against the opposite counter and ate his own sandwich and listened. I haven't stopped moving in 3 years, she said. Not for a day. Not really. She looked at the rain. My car breaking down on a back road in the middle of nowhere is... She stopped. It's not nothing, she said finally. That's all. No, Joseph said. It's not nothing. A door opened down the hall. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, still holding her book. She looked at her father. She looked at Natalie. She was too young to name what she saw in the kitchen and too perceptive to miss it. Her expression moved through several things very quickly. Then she held up her book. I can't figure out why Edmund went back to the White Witch, she announced. It doesn't make sense. And just like that, the kitchen rearranged itself, because a child had walked in and the world had reorganized around her the way it always does. And Natalie turned from the window and Joseph set down his plate. And for the next 20 minutes, the three of them sat together at the kitchen table, while Joseph explained Edmund and the Turkish delight, and the particular way that wanting something badly enough can make a person stop seeing clearly. Lily listened with enormous seriousness. She looked at the illustration in the book. She looked at her father. She looked briefly and unreadably at Natalie. So he knew it was wrong, Lily said. He knew, and he still did it because he wanted something. Yes, Joseph said. That's sad, Lily said. She thought about it. But I understand it. She said this with a gravity that suggested she understood considerably more than a 6-year-old ought to, and then she closed the book and went back to the living room and her puzzle. Natalie looked at the empty doorway for a moment. She's not like other children, she said. No, Joseph said quietly. She's not. He looked at the doorway too, and the expression on his face then was so layered, pride and grief and love and something that was almost fear, the fear of a person responsible for something irreplaceable, that Natalie looked away to give him the privacy of it. That evening, Lily tested her. Natalie was at the kitchen table after dinner, reviewing a document on her laptop, when Lily came and stood beside her chair. Just stood there. Silent. Natalie looked up. Yes? Lily held out her braid from that morning. Some of it had come loose over the course of the day, and the tail end had entirely escaped. It came out, she said. Natalie saved her document. She found the hair ties on the counter where they'd been left. She turned her chair, and Lily stood in front of her, and the re-braiding took longer this time because the curls were more worked through, and Lily kept giving direction. Not so tight there, and that piece goes under. Not over. With the focused authority of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and was not afraid to say so. When it was done, Lily went to the bathroom. She came back. Better than this morning, she said. Natalie nodded. She turned back to her laptop. Why don't you have children? Lily asked. Lily, shh. The question landed the way Lily's questions always landed, flat and genuine with no sense of its own weight. Natalie kept her eyes on the screen for a moment. Then, I haven't found the right situation for it yet. Lily considered this. What does that mean? It means my life has been very full of work, and children need more than that. Lily was quiet. Then she said, my dad is full of work too, but he's still a good dad. Natalie looked at her. Lily met her eyes without flinching. She was not trying to make a point. She was simply reporting an observation, the way she always did. But the observation sat in the air between them like something solid. Yes, Natalie said. He is. Lily nodded once as if something had been confirmed to her satisfaction, and went to bed without another word. Natalie sat at the table for a long time after that, the document open and unread on her screen, looking at nothing in particular. Down the hall, the light under Lily's door went off. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The garden smelled of wet earth and tomato leaves, and the frogs were loud and joyful in the dark. Natalie closed the laptop. She sat in the quiet kitchen for a while longer, in the dark, not looking at her phone, just sitting, listening to the frogs, and the house, and the specific silence of a place where she had not been expected, and had somehow stayed. The Porsche was ready on Tuesday. Ray from the garage called at 10 in the morning, while Natalie was at the kitchen table, and Joseph was in the backyard trimming the tomato steaks, and Lily was at the table across from Natalie doing the reading homework she had declared she would rather do at home than at Miss Clara's. Ray said the part had come in from Memphis, the car was running clean, and she could pick it up any time after 2. Natalie said thank you, and hung up, and sat for a moment looking at the table. The car's ready, she said toward the back door. Joseph came in from the yard wiping his hands on his work pants. He looked at her. Ray can have it done by 2, she said. He nodded. He poured himself a glass of water. He did not say anything immediately, and she had learned in 5 days that this was not evasion. It was just how he moved through things. Carefully, giving them the room they needed. Lily had gone completely still across the table. She was holding her pencil above her worksheet, but she was not writing. She was looking at the paper with an expression that was perfectly blank, in the deliberate way that feelings are blank, when they are being managed by a 6-year-old who has been managing her own feelings longer than she should have had to. That's good news, Joseph said finally. Yes, Natalie said. Neither of them were convincing. She packed her things in the guest room after lunch. It did not take long. She had arrived with a leather overnight bag and a laptop case and nothing else, and she had been wearing Joseph's clean flannel shirt over her own clothes for 2 days, because she had not planned to stay and had not planned for the Tennessee evenings to be cool enough to need a layer. She folded the flannel shirt and set it on the end of the pull-out cushion. She straightened the quilt. She picked up her bag. When she came out, Lily was standing in the hallway. Just standing there, in the middle of the hallway with her arms at her sides, which was unusual. Lily was almost always doing something with her hands. Holding a book, folding a piece of paper, braiding a thread. Now she was just standing there with her arms at her sides and her dark eyes very wide, and her face doing nothing at all, which meant it was doing everything at once. Natalie stopped. The two of them stood in the narrow hallway and looked at each other. "You're leaving," Lily said. "Yes. My car is fixed." Lily looked at the bag on Natalie's shoulder. She looked at the flannel shirt in Natalie's hand. She looked at Natalie's face. Her jaw moved slightly, the way jaws do when words are being organized and reorganized before being released. "You braided my hair wrong on Saturday," she said. "But you fixed it." "You helped me fix it," Natalie said. Lily considered this with immense seriousness. The second one was better. Yes, it was. A long pause. Outside the front window, the afternoon was bright and ordinary and completely indifferent to anything happening inside the house. "Okay," Lily said, "just that." Then she walked back to the kitchen and sat back down at her homework as if the conversation had been about something minor. Natalie stood in the hallway a moment longer. Then she went to the kitchen to say goodbye. Joseph drove her to Ray's garage in the F-150. They did not talk very much on the way. The radio was low. The windows were down. The countryside moved past in its unhurried way, and Natalie looked at it. The dry wildflowers along the shoulder, the old farmhouses set back from the road, the rusted mailboxes and the fields going golden in the afternoon, and felt something she had not expected to feel, which was the particular sadness of leaving a place you had not meant to belong to. At the garage, the Porsche looked absurdly out of place in the gravel lot, beautiful and silver and expensive, surrounded by pickup trucks and a rusted-out Buick, and a riding mower someone had left for repair. Ray, a large man with kind eyes and grease-stained hands, went through what had been done with the efficiency of someone who does not waste words. Natalie paid. She shook his hand. Joseph stood by his truck and waited. When Ray went back inside, Natalie walked to the Porsche. She opened the door and set her bag in the passenger seat and stood there with her hand on the roof, looking at the interior, all leather and screens and designed silence. She turned around. Joseph was leaning against the front of his truck with his arms loosely crossed, looking at her with that expression he had, the one that was not asking for anything and not withholding anything, just present, just entirely there. "Thank you," she said. "You already said that." "I know, I'm saying it again." She paused. "I'm not sure I know what I'm thanking you for exactly. The soup, the table to work at, the—" She stopped. "All of it." "You're welcome for all of it," he said. She looked at him for a moment, him. The sun was behind her and had caught the silver car and threw light against the garage wall, and it should have been a simple, ordinary moment. A woman leaving, a man saying goodbye. And it was not simple, and it was not quite ordinary, and both of them knew it. "Lily," she said. She searched for the word. "She's going to be extraordinary." Something in Joseph's face deepened. "I know," he said. "I'm just trying to deserve it." Natalie got in the car. She started it, and it came alive immediately, smooth and precise, and she pulled out of the gravel lot and onto the road, and she did not look in the rearview mirror, because she knew if she looked, she would see him still standing there, and that would make the next part harder. She drove back toward Nashville. She drove past Route 9. She did not slow down. She told herself she was fine. She had work. She had a life. She had always been very good at the next thing. That was her specific competence. The next thing. Always the next thing. She was 3 miles from the interstate when she pulled over. She sat on the shoulder of the road with the engine running and her hands in her lap and looked at the dashboard, which was telling her the temperature and the time and the direction and everything useful, except the one thing she actually needed to know. She thought about the kitchen table, the crossword, the jigsaw puzzle of the night sky, the braid, the ceramic horse, the flannel shirt still warm from the dryer, the sound of a man laughing in a kitchen, the way a 6-year-old had stood in a hallway with her arms at her sides and said something that was not a goodbye but was also not nothing. She thought about the thing Lily had said about Edmund, that she understood it, knowing something is true and still not being able to make yourself do it because wanting takes over. Natalie sat on the shoulder of the road for 6 minutes. Then she did something that she had never done in her adult professional life. She called Marcus and told him to clear her calendar for the rest of the week. Not postpone, clear. Marcus was silent for a moment. "All of it?" "All of it," she said. She drove back to Nashville, but she did not go to her penthouse. She went to her office and she worked through Wednesday and Thursday and Friday with a focused efficiency that surprised even her team. She slept at the office on Wednesday and went home Thursday night for the first time in a week and stood in her penthouse, all glass and steel and curated space, with a view of the Nashville skyline and every comfort and convenience available, and felt the enormous, echoey quiet of it in a way she never had before. She had been thinking all week about what she was going to do. By Friday evening, she knew. On Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after a silver Porsche had died on Route 9, she made a single phone call to her head of logistics. She told him what she needed. There was a silence. "Ms. Hargrove," he said carefully. "Did you say 80? 80, she said. "And I need them there by noon." Clover Ridge had not seen anything like it in its entire history. The first car appeared at the end of Joseph's Road at 11:45 on Saturday morning. A black Mercedes G-Wagon, moving slowly, followed by another, then a silver Bentley, then a midnight blue Maserati, then more, Porsches and Range Rovers and Aston Martins and cars that people in Clover Ridge had only ever seen in magazines or films, moving in a long, gleaming procession down a road that normally held nothing more extraordinary than Ray's tow truck or the mail carrier's van. Mrs. Atchison next door saw it first and called her daughter. Her daughter called 3 people. Those 3 people called others. By the time the procession had reached Joseph's driveway and begun, improbably, to park along the shoulder of the road in both directions, nearly 40 people from the surrounding streets and houses had come out to their porches and front yards to stand and stare. 80 cars, counted later by multiple people because no one quite believed it the first time. Joseph was in the backyard when Lily came running. She had been watching from the front window. She had seen the first car appear and gone to get her father with the same direct urgency she applied to everything that mattered. "Daddy," she said from the back doorway, "there are a lot of cars." He came around to the front of the house and stopped. He stood on his porch with his hands at his sides and looked at what was happening to his road and his neighborhood, and he said, very quietly, something that was not quite a word. The lead car, the black Mercedes at the front of the procession, had pulled into his driveway. The driver's door opened, and Natalie Hargrove stepped out. She was wearing the same silk blouse she had arrived in 1 week ago. But she was not wearing the heels. She was wearing clean white sneakers. Slightly impractical for a Tennessee gravel driveway, but considerably more honest than before. And she walked up toward the porch with her hands visible and her face open in a way he had not seen from her. Not the managed composure of the first night, not the quiet unraveling of the rainy Sunday, but something altogether new, resolved, certain, vulnerable in the particular way that certainty makes you vulnerable. Joseph came down the porch steps. She stopped a few feet from him. Around them, the neighborhood had gone very still. 40 people on 40 porches not making a sound. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I know. That's not why I'm here." She took a breath. "The Hargrove Group owns 80 vehicles in our corporate fleet. Company cars, executive vehicles, transport. I spent this past week legally transferring all 80 of them, every single one, to a nonprofit that provides transportation assistance to rural families in 7 Tennessee counties. Families who can't get to medical appointments or job interviews or school. Families who live on roads like Route 9 with no service and no signal." The neighborhood remained completely silent. "I did it in my father's name," she said. "And in yours." Joseph looked at her. "In mine?" "You didn't have to stop," she said. "You were tired and you had a daughter waiting and you had every reason to keep driving. But you stopped. And you opened your door. And you fed me soup and gave me a table to work at. And you didn't ask me for a single thing in return." She stopped. "I've had business partners and advisors and people whose entire job is to take care of me. None of them have ever done what you did. None of them." She met his eyes. "I'm not the same person I was on that road. I don't think I can be. I don't want to be." One of the neighbors coughed. A bird called somewhere in the garden. Joseph looked at the 80 cars lining his road. He looked at the people on their porches. He looked at Natalie. "That's a lot of cars," he said. "I know. For one stopped Porsche. Yes. And one pot of soup. The corner of her mouth moved. The best soup I've ever had. He looked at her for a long moment with that expression she had come to know, deep and unhurried, giving the moment the room it needed. Daddy! Lily's voice came from the porch. Both of them turned. Lily was standing at the top of the porch steps in her Saturday pajamas, the purple ones with the yellow moons, with her arms folded across her chest and her dark eyes moving between her father and Natalie, with the absolute attention of someone doing very precise calculations. Natalie turned to face her fully. She did not crouch down the way adults sometimes do with children, performing warmth. She just stood on the gravel and looked at Lily on the steps and said, "Hi, Lily." Lily looked at her for a very long time. Then she looked at the cars, then she looked at her father, she looked at her. Then she looked at Natalie again. "You came back," she said. "Yes." "Why?" Natalie did not hesitate. "Because this is the only place I've felt like myself in a very long time, and because your father is the most honest person I have ever met, and because—" She paused. "Because you told me not to round in the wrong direction." Lily's face did nothing for a moment. Then something in it, some deep structural thing, something that had been held carefully in place since a woman in impractical shoes walked through the front door a week ago, shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. "You remembered that," Lily said. "I remember everything you say," Natalie told her. Another long pause. The neighborhood waited. The 80 cars gleamed in the Saturday sun. Somewhere in the garden, a mockingbird started up. Then Lily unfolded her arms. She walked down the porch steps, slowly, with the dignity she always carried. And she stood on the gravel in front of Natalie and she looked up at her. "Your braid is coming out," she said. Natalie reached up. A section of her hair, pulled back loosely, had indeed begun to slip. "It is," she said. Lily looked at it with professional assessment. "I can fix it," she said. "If you want." The offer was quiet and enormous. 6 years old, and she knew exactly what she was offering and exactly what it cost her. And she was offering it anyway, because she had been watching, carefully, thoroughly, over the course of 7 days and one rainy Sunday, and a jigsaw puzzle, and a ceramic horse, and 1,300 Earths inside Jupiter. And she had decided. Natalie's eyes filled. She blinked it back because she was a person who blinked things back. But not fast enough. Lily saw it. Lily reached up and took Natalie's hand. Not dramatically. Not with any particular ceremony. She just took it the way children take the hands of people they have decided to trust. Simply, completely, without negotiation. She led her up the porch steps. Joseph stood on the gravel and watched his 6-year-old daughter lead this woman through the front door of their house. And he pressed his lips together hard for a moment and looked up at the sky and breathed. Mrs. Atchison, from her porch next door, started crying. She was not the only one. The months that followed moved the way good things move, not in a straight line, but forward. Natalie restructured her life the way she had restructured the fleet. Purposefully, clearly, without apology. She drove to Clover Ridge on weekends first. Then, more often, she hired a deputy CEO, something her father had never permitted, and she took Thursdays. She was there for Lily's first loose tooth and for the school science fair where Lily's model of the solar system won first place, and Lily accepted the ribbon with a seriousness that made the judges slightly nervous. She was there the morning Joseph found a frost-killed rosebush in a client's garden and brought home 3 cuttings to try to save and spent 2 weeks nursing them on the kitchen windowsill until they came back. She watched him do it. She thought about it for a long time. She began doing her own version of that. Taking the things that had gone cold and giving them careful, patient attention. Her relationship with her mother, which had grown distant and formal over years of busyness. Her own body, which she had treated as a vehicle for productivity rather than a place to live. Old friendships she had let go dormant. She did not fix all of them. But she tried. And trying, she found, was different from managing. Joseph asked her to marry him on a Tuesday evening in November, standing in the backyard garden in the cold, with his breath showing white in the air and no ring because he had not wanted to do it with a prop. Just with words, and with the honest fact of who he was and who she was and what they had become to each other, across 7 unlikely days and everything that followed. She said yes before he finished the sentence. Lily, who had been watching from the kitchen window, because Lily watched everything from a strategic position before deciding how to feel about it, came outside immediately. She stood in the garden in her coat and her boots and looked at the two of them with her arms at her sides. "Did she say yes?" she asked her father. "She did," Joseph said. Lily turned to Natalie. She looked at her with those dark, serious eyes that had been measuring her since the very first night, from the couch. In the yellow pajamas with her arms folded, the eyes that had watched her put the ceramic horse back on the shelf and explain the scale of Jupiter and fix a braid in a hallway on a Tuesday morning and come back when she didn't have to come back and cry on gravel in front of 80 cars. "Okay," Lily said. Just that. But the way she said it, quiet and certain and without reservation, contained everything. A child who had learned early that the people who stayed were the ones worth trusting, and who had now, after 7 months of watching and waiting and testing and deciding, determined that this woman was one of those people. She stepped forward and put her arms around Natalie's waist and pressed her face against her side and held on. Natalie held on too. She held on with both arms and closed her eyes and felt the weight of the small girl against her and the cold garden air and the smell of Joseph's rosemary and the last light fading over the Tennessee hills. And she understood, fully, finally, completely, that none of this had been an accident. The broken car, the empty road, the soup, the table, the horse on the shelf, the braid, the stars, every ordinary thing had led to this. Joseph put his arms around both of them. The three of them stood in the garden in the November cold, and the mockingbird was quiet for once, and the stars were just beginning to appear. First one, then another, then one very bright one a little to the left of where you'd been looking. And Lily, her face still pressed against Natalie's side, smiled. Not the careful, evaluating expression she gave the world. Not the blank diplomatic mask she had learned to wear when things were uncertain. A real one. The kind that reaches the eyes before the brain approves it. Just like her father. Just like the woman who had stopped, finally, to stay.